great day. I think as we're getting close to the end of the day, I can congratulate you on a terrific summit, and being on the BayBrazil board, I had my doubts. When Marguerite said we want to do this in person, I'm like, you sure you want to do it in person? Like hybrid or sort of Zoom might be a good option. But Marguerite's persisted, and I think we had a fantastic day. And it's so nice to see all of you in person, many old friends, and also making new ones. And it's funny, as I was getting ready to come to the conference, this is my first in-person conference since this all started, all the pandemic fun. And it just turns out, Marguerite, I looked at my schedule from December 4th in I guess that would have been 2019, was the last in-person conference I did before the pandemic, and it was a BayBrazil.
BayBrazil at Stanford.
That's right.
Steve helped us. Oh, where's Steve? He left. Yeah.
So nice bookends in terms of doing conferences. So it's great again to be in person again. And I had to dust off my blazer. I had to go back because I was like, oh, I need business cards. Do people still use business cards? Where are they? I had to go through my closet for them. But anyway.
Contactless. Use LinkedIn. Just scan the QR code.
I know. I felt like sort of DVDs versus streaming, right? Or like fax machines or something. Anyway, so we're going to talk over the next 25 minutes or so about Latin American venture capital friends, and I'm delighted to be here with CK and Antoine. I'm reflecting back on Silicon Valley Bank's first trip to Brazil. That was early 2012, so just about a decade ago, just a little bit short. Met CK on that very first trip. I think you just joined
my first day on the job.
With your new boss, right? and Antoine, I met your partners, of course. Scott and Cliff were ambassadors, so we're in Brazil that week. I think fundraising and doing other things there. So two great partners for many years in our journey in Brazil. So I thought I'd tee up the conversation about investment trends just by reflecting on sort of the what Brazil and Latin America was like a decade ago from a VC perspective. And we've got so many people in the know, venture-backed entrepreneurs, other investors, so hopefully we can get into a good discussion later about it. But in 2012, Perlavka, and Julie is here somewhere, I think. And so if you want to debate these numbers, you can see Julie. But in 2012, my Lavka numbers show that $400 million was invested in Latin America. And so if you compare that even to last year at $4.1 billion across the region, that's 10x through 3/4 of this year, where Lavka reported $11 billion. That's like 27x. And then at the pace we're on, where we're going to either triple, maybe even quadruple over last year's 4.1 billion, it's going to be like 35x or more in terms of VC invested.
Can you imagine if that was a fund returner?
Yeah. Well, you were active back then, Carlos. Did you have anything from that era that?
We had stuff we started in 13, 14, that's doing very well. So yes.
Fantastic. Well, another lens to look at it is unicorns, right? And so, in 2012, I'm hard pressed to remember any. Maybe Soberano could have been one, but the first ones that I remember coming onto my radar screen around 2018, when you had 99 get acquired by Didi, and Nubank, I think, raised money at $1 billion that year. But again, fast forward from 2018, only 3 years, we have, again, Lavka data through July, we have 23 unicorns. So quite not only, obviously a lot more unicorns, but an acceleration in terms of how many were created only in the last couple of years. And obviously both these guys have several unicorns in their portfolio. And I guess the last observation, because we're talking about LatAm and not just Brazil, is sort of how regional the business has become. When we first went to Brazil, most of the investors you talk to there, whether it was Monashis or Kazakh even, who was kind of pan-regional, but they would all say, we're investing really in Brazil. And today, that year, 2012, Brazil represented something like 2/3 of total investment dollars. Today, it's about 55–56%, so still the biggest market. But you look at a market like Mexico, which was probably about 8% back then, is about 22% today. So, really you've seen a shift, and the investor themselves, and we'll talk to these guys about it, are now investing across the region. Again, Mexico has 4 unicorns. You have a unicorn in Uruguay, right? So it's really changed quite a bit in a decade. So why don't we get started, and Carlos and Antoine, if I can ask each of you, even though everybody knows you're here, just to introduce yourselves and your firms.
Hi, I'm Antoine Colosso, managing partner of Valor Capital Group, which is a cross-border fund investing in Latin America as well as outside of Latin America to help companies enter the Latin American market, primarily Brazil. And we've been doing this for a decade now. So we do have some investments from the 2012 vintage timeframe, which, as Carlos was saying with his portfolio, are now really growing pretty exciting fashion. So.
And I'm Carlos Cochran. I'm with Qualcomm Ventures. I run Americas for us today. We have been investing in Brazil, LatAm, for almost 10 years now, and globally for coming up on 21 years. So we have a pretty hashed out playbook. We know what we stand for and what to do, and hopefully, and we've seen great results. Basically, we're Qualcomm's VC arm, if you will. We focus on opportunities that, if successful, somehow help drive the growth of the industry, remove barriers, and hopefully help grow our business along the way.
So, guys, we talked, referencing some of the data in terms of, how much investment has gone into the region, and just, the tripling or quadrupling in 1 year. What is driving the explosion of investment in LatAm?
I mean, on the one end, the world's awash in cash, right? I mean, the interest rates starting maybe to creep up now, but you even saw in Brazil, for the first time in Brazil's history, we had low single-digit interest rates, right? So even that drove a lot of pessoa física, Brazilian, regular people to say, hey, I'm no longer going to do fixed income, and I'm going to look into alternative assets. So that's one thing. This is a global phenomenon, right? Worldwide, we're seeing valuations crazy here. We're seeing the pace of the industry as a whole has really picked up. Deals are getting done in a week or so, right? And we're seeing that some of that in Brazil as well, which is even in the region, which is even more interesting. So that's one side. The other one is there is, I think, our market now is mature, much more mature than it was 10 years ago. We've seen a number of exits. We see entrepreneurs who made money here, started companies. So we're seeing that sort of, there's the PayPal mafia, there's the 99 mafia, there's, and Nubank's going to go public now, and, I'm sure it's going to be spawning a lot of entrepreneurs starting companies, etc. So that's another factor. The third factor is, everything has gone digital, and it's much cheaper today, much easier today to start something. So that's, you put all those factors together. The reality is, I think this space, COVID has shown that being connected is it. And you connect with people, and you're connecting things. And, earlier today, Hans talked about the issue with ports and the supply chain, right? Well, you fix supply chains by putting sensors on things and collecting data and doing intelligence and AI, and the next thing you know, you help solve that, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but we're seeing digital transformation really, happen again across the board. So it's here to stay. The valuations are nosebleed and make us dizzy, right? So I don't know about that, but in general, it's here to stay.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think that also the market has evolved, the ecosystem has evolved in a number of different ways, but I also think that there has been deregulation in certain areas that has allowed companies to arise. So financial services, as we've talked about, fintech is massive, but why is that? Because the oligopoly of 5 banks was allowed to be broken and then allows other companies to grow. And now you've got companies attacking financial services on all sorts of layers, from banking to credit, et cetera, right? So I think that's one area. You're seeing that in healthcare now, so you're seeing more companies going after healthcare solutions, both on the provider side and the payer side, but they weren't able to in the past. And I think so these markets that are massive, I mean, they're very large markets in Brazil and Latin America, which weren't able to be penetrated in the past, are now people can go after them, right? So I think that's enabled that as well. Plus, as Carlos said, you've got money awash everywhere in the world, but now finally people are saying, okay, Latin America is an asset area where I can invest. They should have been doing it for a longer time, as I would say we would both agree, but they're finally kind of opening their eyes to it. I don't know if what's happened in China has shifted some of the EM money over to Latin America as well. That's a possibility as well, you know, in addition. But you've got large funds that are global in nature that are raising billions and billions of dollars and have to put their money to work. And so Brazil, Latin America is a natural place to do it. And so you're seeing not only later stage valuations going up, but earlier stage valuations going up also because they're trying to put bets on things. And frankly, they can. It's option value. You can put, for them, $5 million is nothing, $10 million is nothing. It's option value for something that's going to grow. So all of that, I think, is playing together.
Yeah. Well, you know, you help to turn it on. You know, Carlos, you talked a bit about, well, both of you guys talked about the amount of stimulus that's in the economies around the world right now. You know, as a result, central banks are starting, you know, seeing inflation. You have that in Brazil you have that here. And there's discussion about the Fed raising rates, that the central bank in Brazil has been raising rates. Do you think, as you look forward, can this pace of investment continue, and what might derail it, given, you know, you have all the politics as usual, or, you know, whether it's in Brazil or Chile, and so you always have the sort of the macro environment that you know, that can shake things up. So what do you think?
I asked the same question to Hans, and he gave a very rosy answer. but so I don't think the pace can keep up forever, right? We don't get an exponential curve going all the way to the end, right? So that. However, I think the markets and the companies we invest in, they are high growth companies, right? And whether the economy grows at 1% or 3% or 5%, it really doesn't matter much for those companies. I think eventually it may affect fundraising, which there's plenty of cash now, so I don't think we need to worry about that fundraising. I'm talking about fundraising for funds, right? And on the other end, exits. And I think maybe that's the first area where we might see issues, right? If there's a hiccup in the market, I think we'll see, you know, the public markets, and then it typically takes some time. There's some inertia for private markets to react. But if something does happen, then I think that's how we'll see this unfold, right? When? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, but maybe Anton has.
I don't have the crystal ball either, but I cannot see this pace continuing ad infinitum. It's just not possible. I'm exhausted already, but I mean, you know, personally, but no, I think that you still do have a lot of cash out there, but I do think that there are going to be things that are changing in the markets, right? I mean, you're seeing inflation rising, you're seeing interest rates rising in Brazil, for example. That's one thing. You are seeing certain sectors within the stock market, like the financial players in the stock market. This week, even Stone got hit very hard because they missed earnings. That will have ripple effects over time, I think, also. The way we look at Brazil next year is also could be very turbulent. You've got an election, which we know is going to be, you know, all elections we've seen throughout the last several years have been bumpy. And so I think that is another thing that could slow things down. I agree with Carlos that our companies are not aligned with the macroeconomic situation, because generally we're going against a lot of those things. We're breaking through and making things more efficient, so there is a lot of upside there. But that does affect a psyche and so on. So I do think that there will be some slowdown in some areas.
So let me just follow.
Turn it on again.
What's going on? You know, following up on your statement, Antoine, about, you know, investors kind of waking up to LatAm, right? Fundamentally, is LatAm kind of underinvested, and so from that perspective, can you see the growth of dollars invested in LatAm continuing just because it's, sort of catching up with other parts of the world?
Yeah, I think we're still, if you look at kind of VC dollars compared to GDP, I haven't done the latest numbers, but I know that we were way under if you looked at China, India, and other markets. And so I think there's still a lot of capacity that could be there. But again, we can't do this overnight. Like these ecosystems have to grow at a right pace. And I think that's what I worry about is when things grow too quickly at one point, they can drop quickly. And a lot of the other thing, and we were talking about this earlier, is you have to be in the market for a long time. And you have a lot of money that's coming in that's global players that can pull their money out very quickly. And so we don't have a huge base of assets that are dedicated to the market necessarily for the long term. And so that's what worries you, that could change, that could whipsaw very quickly. And so that's a concern that I would have.
So speaking of money coming in from the U.S. and other parts of the world, certainly. Maybe it's just running out of batteries. Thank you. So certainly a lot of the bigger checks are being written by some of the growth investors around the world. So we talked about valuations, and I know again 10 years ago the investors, it was very much a buyer's market, right? And so you can really dictate on valuation. And so how do you guys get comfortable with valuations today? Is it a lot about FOMO when you go into your investment committees? How do you justify valuation levels from in terms of your theses?
It depends on the deal, depends on the situation. In some cases we pass. We don't. I mean, there's a deal in Brazil got done recently. It was very relevant to us. We have a couple of portfolios globally that do similar stuff. We like the space, we know the space, and we passed. We just couldn't get around, right? And we're a strategic investor. You could say, oh, dump money, go invest because it's relevant, right? That's not the case. So, and then in some cases we just say, okay, we kind of like, look, if this is successful, this is really game changing, it's going to be this big, etc. And then we hope that they grow into the valuation. We look at obviously the traction and the velocity of things progressing, and we put a bet. But it's not easy. Antoine said he's tired. We're tired. I mean, it's like the deals getting done so fast, and you got to move fast, and you have to. Certainly an entrepreneur's market, right? So we gotta show here's what I can do with you, for you, work with you, etc. And we have to fight for allocation in some of these deals. So our lives have been made harder over the past few years. That's for sure.
Yeah, we try also to say no, and we do say no sometimes. I think it's hard. You don't want to lose out on certain deals, but what's actually harder is trying to build out your return profile, because when you're looking at multiples, do you look at multiples that are happening today? Or do you have to take those down because to say, look, if some company is getting a 50x multiple right now, is that realistic for when this company is going to go exit at some point, right? And that's what you have to really worry about. And so what we try to do also is now, in those verticals which we're very interested, trying to build our thematic analysis and say, these are the things that we really like. These are the kinds of companies that we see this model working out very well in Brazil or wherever in Latin America. And can we find companies that fit that? Then we can move faster. Because as Carlos was saying, deals are happening. You're finding out about it, and they want to close in a week. And it's crazy. Right? You can't do a real due diligence in that amount of time. So we have to do more work up front to be ready for those deals. And I think we try as much as possible to do that. And that's the only way we can act quickly.
Same here. We've actually stepped up our sort of understanding themes, understanding sectors, doing mapping. We've stepped that up, that kind of work, front loading, right? Because we have to have an opinion, right? And we have to sort of be able to move right. So very same thing.
So as the amount of capital is being invested, I know Valor has raised a new fund, an opportunities fund, and Qualcomm. I'm not sure how you think of it from a balance sheet view, but are you, is there liquidity out there to support larger funds? Are you to write bigger checks? Is it driving bigger fund sizes from your perspective too in Latin America?
In Latin America, yes. I mean, you're seeing bigger funds happening. You're seeing not only early stage, but as you said, opportunity funds that are raising bigger. Globally, obviously, you're seeing massive funds. I mean, in the billions and billions of dollars. So yes, there's an enormous amount of liquidity. I think, as Carlos said, where else are you going to get return right now? And if you look at all the major universities and their endowments, if you saw they had 40, 50% returns last year, much of that was from venture, right? So that they're going to put their money back into venture because that's where they made their money, and they get rewarded by doing that, right? So I think that right now, there's a virtuous cycle of putting money into venture.
Used to be the alternative assets for endowments was like, I don't know, the mid-teens. Now it's like 40+%, right? So for us, I mean, we had just finished our fiscal year. We had a record number of deals, record dollars, and we're returning more money than we're investing. So from sort of our existing portfolio. So we I think a couple of things. Our ability to do deals is still the same sort of thing, right? So there's only so many people. We're right now comfortable with the number of investment professionals we have. I mean, here or there we're going to add, but overall. So it's just average check size has gone up, right? And I think we talked about this already, but the speed of deals has gone up. We have certainly stepped up. Have to adapt there, right? That's certainly something you have to adapt. If you're going to take the sort of the traditional pace of understand several weeks, etc., you're probably not, going to be left behind.
So I'm going to ask another question, but I'm going to ask the folks in the room to start thinking about their questions, because we can spend some time just chatting amongst us. That'd be great. So this is a discussion about the region, and again, you see so much activity happening in Mexico over the last couple of years. Chile, Colombia is really active these days. So when you look across the region, what are the markets that are interesting to you, and are there particular companies that are coming out of sort of sectors that are stronger in one country versus another, or I guess general opportunities?
I mean, we've done recently a few deals in Mexico, for example. 2 of them are in the retail logistics space. One of them is in the crypto space. We're seeing crypto deals coming out of like Argentina, Mexico. We've done a fintech deal out of Chile. So we're seeing kind of I'm not sure that we're seeing necessarily, there's a lot of fintech happening in Mexico, just like in Brazil. Outside of that, I think we're seeing different pockets of different types. Retail tech is happening a lot throughout the markets in Latin America, I'd say. And crypto is another one that's coming up throughout Latin America. But I think we're seeing a lot more activity in all the markets you mentioned: Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Peru, etc. So I think there's still, besides Mexico, I don't think there's nearly as large ecosystems as anywhere else, but you're seeing very good quality entrepreneurs and good quality companies coming out of those.
We haven't been as active ex-Brazil. We're looking at a deal in Mexico now. And I think in general, I'm surprised to see how Mexico has come. Remember 5 years ago, you remember Mexico. It's just amazing. But yeah, Colombia is a great market. A lot of developers, etc. I think what I want to say is, typically a lot of the companies were, you have to have a large enough market, etc. But we're seeing more companies just developing solutions that are, effectively global, right? And they can go anywhere. So it's just going to happen more and more.
Well, Carlos, you're saying the same thing about you're going to make your first Mexican investment 5 years ago. So
actually, we did have a deal approved that we ended up not getting in the end allocation. It's a pity it became a unicorn. But
we took CK down for a trip, and he almost ended up getting mugged. So, but we'll leave that discussion over drinks. All right. So, do we have a question? I have more, of course. Julie, of course, you'd have a question.
Of course, I have a question. Yeah. So the numbers have grown really dramatically, right? And the pace cannot continue. But the growth is going to continue, right? I mean, I was looking at some U.S. venture figures, a little map of venture investment per city, and Los Angeles alone is over $30 billion a year. And I was, it kind of took the wind out of my sails, you know. It was like Latin America crossed 10 billion this year. It's so huge. Is it too big? And it's like, it's still like a third of the size of LA. Granted, they're at different moments in their ecosystem. So, you know, not to get into the risky predictive statements, but I am curious for the long outlook. Are we going to look back in 10 years and kind of laugh at how small this was and how big it seemed? It seems to me that there's a certain trajectory that the market is on that is inevitably going to keep growing in the long haul.
I would agree with that. I think Latin America is going to continue to grow. I think the question is the pace of the growth, right? So I think will it be 10x from here or 7x? I don't know, but yes, it will continue to grow. There's so much opportunity in Latin America that's still untapped. So I definitely think, you know, we will look back on this and say this was still early days. And I think it's very early days in the ecosystem, right? Because even when we started 10 years ago, it really wasn't that much there in some ways in the ecosystem. And so it's come a long way in 10 years, and 10 years from now, I think I think it is still a great time to be starting a company in Latin America, investing in Latin America. It's just about, can we get reasonable valuations? Can we get reasonableness in the market right now? And right now you're feeling that there's a little bit of too much exuberance in some ways, too quickly. And that's what you get. You just need to tamper it. So.
I agree, and I want to just add one dimension, which is, there's so many industries to be rewritten, right? That's, you know, there's all sorts of B2B SaaS companies doing this, doing payroll, doing all sorts of things, right? So I think we'll see more and more of that. You always have the local idiosyncrasies. And then you have this, you know, phenomenon of Web3 and decentralized, and I think that's just going to put power in the hand of entrepreneurs, again, to accelerate this rewriting of industries. And then last, I talked about it, I have to talk about it on Qualcomm, right? So I'm a huge believer in IoT. So again, I think IoT hasn't been much looked at, but we have, look, Samsara published their S1 today. The numbers are just surreal, right? I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it or not. We have an asset in Brazil, probably similar, obviously years behind what they are, right? But it's like we see the value proposition to the fleet owners, et cetera, and we just think this is going to happen, a bunch across different industries. You asked earlier themes for countries. We're a big believer in AgTech in Brazil. Again, it's a less sophisticated market. It's going to take a little longer, et cetera, but if you're talking 2030 and beyond, I have no doubt that it will play a role.
Yeah, and we've been waiting for some of these sectors to go tech, right? And so ag is a perfect one. We've been looking at it for 8 years and couldn't find the right deal. And now we've done a couple of them in Brazil, and it's finally coming to that state. And there's so much opportunity, as you said. I mean, it's the breadbasket of the world. It's going to be a massive provider of food for the world. And so we have to bring technology to those sectors. So I absolutely agree.
Who else has a question? I got a comment. Mike?
Yeah, so I'm curious, are your deals changing? Yeah, don't worry, it's a softball. It's a softball, Antoine. Don't worry. Are your deals, the structure of them, are they still U.S. Delaware C Corps, or are you doing deals in country in the legal compliance for those countries?
Yeah, we still have Cayman, Delaware structures. Yeah.
See, easy.
Thank you. Anything else? It's a good question, Mike, because we're here.
But that's debatable.
Yeah.
So I want to throw some fire here. I mean, there's depending, right? Some of these structures, if we're seeing more and more exits with local people buying, and they want to buy the local entity. So you set up this whole structure and they say, screw that, I just want to buy the local entity, right? So I think we could see a change of that.
But for us, I will say that from a governance perspective, we're really going to stay with Cayman for ourselves. We have had those situations where we had to unwind it basically because they bought the Brazilian entity, and it is ugly. It is not fun. But
We had 2 or 3, Michelle, were like that. 3. Yeah, it's ugly.
It is
so
ugly. It's ugly to unwind.
Makes you ask the question. So,
but from a governance perspective, it's much better, right?
And we still only see offshore structures, but I suppose that there's some self-selection there in terms of the companies we're working with. We have time for maybe another question. Oh, you have?
I would love to have a question.
Yeah, all right. Well, the host's privilege, right?
I don't know about that.
No, so, thank you, thank you. So the VC firm Atlântico just published a very interesting survey. Something that really caught my attention is the fact that they interviewed 300 students from 300 Brazilian universities. 39% of these students are planning to found a company. When they talk just with the computer sciences students, is 77%. I thought that was very impressive, and my question actually is a request. What is your message for the young, for the students or the young entrepreneurs of Latin America, not just Brazil, but the region as a whole?
There's never been a better time to do it, just do it.
No, absolutely. It's you know, again, if we look back 10 years ago, you didn't have that, right? Students wanted to go to banking, consulting, civil service, right? And so it was not seen as a career path. Now people see it as a career path because you've got examples. And you finally got examples of people who are making it and making it big. And so it's a great time. I mean, that's what's interesting is from, I mean, there's a whole question about what's happening with the labor markets overall, right? It's a global labor market. Technology, students in technology can work anywhere in the world now, right? For companies anywhere in the world. They can do it in Brazil, they can do it anywhere. I'm hoping that they will do it in Brazil because I think there are a lot of things that they can solve and make more efficient. So, and in Latin America, throughout Latin America also. So, build companies in Latin America because we need them, and there's a lot of opportunity and a huge upside on them too.
And that's actually a super statistic, because one of the worries we have is, again, is there enough? What's the talent pipeline, right? And as Antoine said, there's people in Brazil, developers, getting hired to work for a US-based company, can get to live in Floripa, make money in US dollars, right? Which is basically taking talent away from our company. So the more, the merrier, and that'd be great.
Well, I was talking to a bunch of the founders last night at dinner, and they're saying, you know, that the talent is still not putting value behind stock options. When's that going to change?
Absolutely. No, we have to continue to do an education job to educate people about stock options and the value of stock options for sure. Because they're not, you're right, they're not valuing it. But some people are making a lot of money on it.
I have seen improvement. It used to be worse 5 years ago. I think
It's
with
still,
the
it's still not where
exits-
it needs to be though.
Well, yeah, but it's in the right direction. Gotta be optimistic.
Being optimistic. Well, that's a nice. Well, we'll end on a very optimistic note then. I know we're always we frequently find ourselves as being the last panel before the wine. So why don't we draw to a conclusion? Please join me in thanking Carlos and Antoine, and of course Marguerite for organizing such a great day.